I've heard you talk a lot about highly powerful, rich individuals and the way that they go about their lives, the type of technology that they have with backup phones, the way that they see the world, and their sort of views, operating protocol in their own mind, psychological profiles, and stuff like that. I had a conversation a couple of years ago on the show with a guy called Daniel Schmachtenberger, who's an incredibly smart dude, polymath guy, and he gets himself into similarly high level conversations. He told me this really sort of harrowing story about he was at dinner with somebody who is very influential and has the resources to be able to act on whatever it is that they want to do. This person said something to him along the lines of Daniel had brought up some of the things that he was proposing might be quite damaging. It might make people's lives worse, just not particularly good for society. And this guy said, well, I'm an apex predator. Apex predators don't care about what the prey do. In your experience around high-powered individuals who both have the resources and the network to be able to do stuff, have you ever come across somebody who you think it would be better if this particular type of personality didn't have access to the capability to enact their dreams?
Uh, so my answer is no, but you may not like the rest of my answer. So I think that the apex predator attitude is very much prevalent among the ultra wealthy, specifically around the ultra wealthy who have built their wealth from nothing. I'm not talking about like talent, like your actors, your talent people, your musicians that are out there, your podcasters, right? These are people who become extremely wealthy, but they didn't really build their wealth from nothing. They built their talent from nothing, and then somebody else came in and hired their talent. So your talent always, it's objectively, your talent works for somebody. They have a production schedule they have to meet. They have a boss, right? They can't just stop producing. If they stop producing movies or stop producing podcasts, then they're not going to make any more money. But a true entrepreneur, a true business owner is somebody who can stop working, but the business keeps running, right? The business keeps growing, it keeps doing whatever it wants to do. Among those individuals, we call them ultra high net worth. Ultra high net worth in our world and our community, we define ultra high net worth as people with a net worth of 15 million or more. So that goes up quite high. There are people who are worth billions of dollars. But essentially, if you're worth a net worth of about $15 million, you have built that. You haven't been given that. If you come from a wealthy family, it's a completely different thing. But you most likely own a scalable business, and now that's the business that you run. And to get to that point, you have had to make very harsh decisions. You have had to learn how to get into the mind of your customer. You've had to learn how to master negotiation skills with not just people, but with banks, with policymakers, with lobbyists, whatever it might be. So absolutely, in my experience around ultra high net worth wealthy individuals, they have that apex predator attitude. And to be very frank, I am very happy they have that apex predator attitude, because without your apex predators, who's going to rule the roost, right? Like, do we want arbitrary, unpredictable leadership, or do we want very decisive, very predictable leadership, right? If you think of a lion is an apex predator. A lion remains the head of their, what are lions in? Prides, right? A pride has one head lion until another lion takes that lion down. But there's always only one. And if you don't want to compete for the pride, you don't have to compete for the pride. But the pride is stronger because it only has one lion. The same thing is true in multiple different types of societies and civilizations. In many ways, we've structured our own human experience to reward the apex predator.
Selects for that person.
Correct. And then if only when that person times out, right, after 4 years or 8 years, if it's the president, or they never time out, if you consider a congressperson to be an apex predator, right, they just have to keep winning the collective vote of their pride. So in many ways, we are people need that. Tribally, people need a tribal elder. They need a tribal leader. We forget that we are a tribal animal.
I learned a while ago about the functional usefulness of psychopaths. And I asked this guy that researched psychopaths clinically. He was going into jails and speaking to them, doing interviews and stuff. And he said basically, I was like, look, it's so maladaptive for the group. Why would you have a psychopath? You know, why is it not being competed out of the gene pool? People would have been killed because they would have fucked over too many others. You can't travel from town to town. You're in a Dunbar number of 100 or 150 or something. You do this once or twice and people are going to know what your nature is. And he said, yes, but you're forgetting that smeared across an entire population, it's actually quite useful to have psychopaths. If you need to go and wreck Lindisfarne as a group of Vikings, it's actually kind of useful to have a group of 10 men that you can throw in there that are going to have no remorse about going and pillaging and bringing back a load of gold. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. And I wonder whether it's possible to look at modern apex predator type individuals with the same sort of lens. That
absolutely, yeah.
Look, this is a very specific type of tool or weapon, depending on your point of view. And the choice is, we have more than our enemy has more than us. Who do you want to be generating GDP? Who do you want to be pushing innovation? Who do you want to be making the strongest connections and networks, not only within this country, but also outside of this country? Now there is an externality. There's a risk here that the more that person gets power, the more dangerous that individual becomes. But they're dangerous in kind of a predictable way.
Correct.
Sometimes. And also, I'd rather have more psychopaths on my team than on somebody else's.
Yeah, I think, and what you're getting to are fantastic conclusions that people just that people aren't comfortable analyzing a situation to get to that point. Do you want to have Navy SEALs that operate on behalf of the United States, or do you want to disband your Navy SEALs and instead have the Navy, a Navy cheerleading team that goes out there and tries to make friends with everybody? You want cold, hard killers when you need cold, hard killers. You want apex predators when you need apex predators. And what happens is whoever the leading society is, it was true with the Romans, it's true with us, it's going to be true with whoever becomes the next great superpower in the world. That position of first place is a luxury that we tend to take for granted. We all know what it was like in high school or college if you were an athlete. If you were the best athlete on the team, or if your team was the best team in the division, whatever it might be, everybody just expects you to win and win and win again and win again and win again. And then if you're ever beaten, the loss is so much more devastating than if you're the second or third best team and you're used to taking hits and you're used to winning, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
CIA believes that all people are born with a spy secret superpower. For some people, that means they can win deals. For others, they can spot liars. Some can even seduce lovers. I built a free 3-minute test to help reveal to you exactly what your secret hidden superpower is. All you have to do is click on the link in the description below, take the test, and start using your spy superpower to stay ahead of 99% of people.
Right? There's a reason professional athletes suffer from their own kind of trauma from the intense demands of performance, because we as a culture, we actually like apex, cold-hearted killers. We like them and we celebrate them in sports. We celebrate them in movies. We like books about, assassins and killers and super spies. It's something that culturally we all like and we all want. And the reason is because we all recognize there's a certain level of security when you're with the most proficient of any given skill.
There is a functional utility to being around the most dangerous weapon in the room. This was one of the reasons put forward by an evolutionary psychologist when I asked her why many women seem to have an obsession with dark romance and true crime. And for the record, I believe that mafia boss stories are blokes' equivalents of true crime for chicks. The guys that love learning about Sammy the Bull and about drug kingpins and stuff, you are not allowed to look down on girls that love to learn about true crime serial killers, because you are listening to the exact same podcast. It's just on the male side of the fence. But I asked her this question about why is it that these women, and you also find as well with serial killers, that women fall in love with these killers. these guys are on death row, and women are sending them marriage proposals and gifts and all sorts of stuff. It's very dangerous. Why is it that women seem to have this particular obsession? And there's a bunch of different reasons, and maybe some of them or all of them and none of them, but attaching yourself to somebody that is incredibly dangerous falls you under the umbrella of their protection. There is also an element of being able to be better educated in order to protect yourself. So, like, I need to know what I need to avoid in order so that I don't get attacked by it. But yeah, man, I do think that the functional utility of having some dangerous guys on your side of the pitch is a difficult reality, because they are going to do things that you're not going to be happy about. And also, it's very right to say that we have it's very difficult to be at the top of your game, the top of any game, and not have people secretly waiting for your downfall. Correct. It's an unbelievably difficult line to walk, to be the best at what you do, whatever it is, whatever field it is, whether it's podcasting or sports or singing or something else. And Rob Henderson, one of my buddies, shared an article a while ago about how there was, I think, 4 of the most popular hero story arcs that are typical, and none of them included the person that came into the story the hero and left the story the hero. There is the Icarus, the guy that starts at nothing, flies too close to the sun and then crashes. There is the guy that starts high, falls, and then comes back, a redemption. There is a from nothing to something, and there is a 4th one as well that I can't remember. No one wants the person that comes into the world with everything and leaves with everything. Everybody wants them to fail. Yeah,
it's interesting, and it's difficult, because it's for many people that demotivates them from trying to be the best. For many people, that's exactly the governor that keeps them from taking it one step further, or taking one extra risk, or being vocal, or being face forward. It's hard, because when you're out there as an athlete, as a business owner, as a podcaster, whatever you might be, you do feel it. You feel. I mean, you don't even have to feel it. You can read it on Twitter. There's plenty of people out there chanting for your failure every day. If you don't know what it looks like, just look at my feed, and like, there's people out there chanting every day for me to fail. And that's just part of what it takes to be the person who's striving for more. If you want to be ignored and overlooked by history, nobody will ever send you death threats. But if you want to make a splash, if you want to make a ripple in history, you're going to piss people off along the way. You just have to learn to accept it. And that's one of the things that when I'm around my ultra high net worth clients, it's really refreshing to me, because they're clients, but they're also mentors. I'm striving to try and be in their shoes. I'm learning from them every day. I'm learning what I want to be, but I'm also learning what I don't want to be. Because to get to that level, you've made incredible sacrifices to your health, in your family, to your marriage, right? Like there's some seriously devastating circumstances that your ultra wealthy, your business owners, who we all think that it must be so great to be Jeff Bezos, it must be so easy to be Mark Zuckerberg. Those guys have not had easy lives. Do they have money? Yes, they have money, but they have problems that we don't want. They don't get to binge watch a Netflix series. That's not in their universe. I get to cuddle with my kids, read them a bedtime story, kiss them on the forehead. That's my reality, and I like that reality. But there's a lot of people out there. Your apex predators don't get to do that.
There was an idea I came up with about a reverse role model. So role models are the aspirational version of what you want to look up to. A reverse role model is the inversion of that. It's the people who have the traits that you don't want to have. Yes. And from where I come from in the northeast of the UK, there weren't many people that were perfectly like the person I wanted to be. But there were many people who had individual fallibilities that I definitely didn't want. And I could look around and say, okay, I definitely don't want his relationship with his family, his approach to gambling, his approach to finances, the way that he treats his partner, all of these things. And I think a lot more success can be found in life by avoiding ruin than by chasing success. You don't ever get completely killed out of the game by not getting sufficient success, but you can do it by multiplying by 0, right? It's the never multiply by 0 rule. And that to me is very reassuring for people that feel like they don't have people around them that they want to be like. Like, look, I know that you might not have an aspirational role model at the moment, but you can avoid failure. And that is not nothing. That is a lot more than not nothing. That might be even 75% of what you're trying to do in life is avoid failure. That might be even more. It might be 90% of what is involved in success is simply avoiding failure.
Yeah, and it's funny because I love this whole idea of a reverse role model. I've never heard it before, so thank you for presenting it. I would say that just because failure is a word that gets misunderstood and misinterpreted so many ways, when you define it, you're talking about don't be like the reverse role model. Don't be like this person who represents the things that you don't value and the things that you don't believe in. So when you call that person failure, I agree. But what ends up happening is a lot of times people start to fear failure, not understanding that like failure is totally fine. Trying and missing is better than never trying at all. So the idea of run away from the negative role model is still taking you somewhere. And it may not be the place that you're ultimately going, but it's definitely, you're not running close to the place that you don't want to go.
Yes.
And that's a really cool visual when you talk about that reverse role model.
What have you come to believe about dealing with risk and putting yourself out there and having a lean in mentality? You know, you're somebody that was working in a clandestine way in the shadows with no public profile for a long time. And the last year or so has been pretty wild for you in terms of exposure and all that sort of stuff. What have you come to believe about that?
Yeah, so what I believe about risk is a mix of what I've experienced and then what I've been trained. One of the first things that CIA trains us is to put definitions around risk. There's two types of risk. There's real risk and there's perceived risk. Real risk is the real quantifiable objective risk, right? When you drive in a car, you are actually putting yourself at risk. If you were just walking on a sidewalk, you're objectively at less risk of a car accident than when you drive in a car. Whenever you pick up a weapon to go to a shooting range, you're putting yourself at risk, right? Those are real tangible risks with real tangible probabilities. There is a probability out there about the likelihood that you're going to get in a car accident at any given moment. That's all real risk. Perceived risk is the risk that most of us deal with all the time. It's the fear that we have about getting in a car accident, even when we're not in a car. It's the fear we have about being mugged just because we're in a city. It's the fear we have about making our boss angry or disappointing our spouse or you name it. There's all these perceived risks that we're constantly going through in our head, these what if scenarios, these catastrophic scenarios. It's part of a cognitive, there's something called cognitive distortions. And there's a specific cognitive distortion called catastrophizing. And that's what we're doing with perceived risk. We're seeing all the worst scenarios and believing that they are somehow likely to happen just because we can think of them. Perceived risk and real risk are not the same thing. So CIA teaches us to focus on real risk. Just because we're lying about our name and going into a foreign country and trying to steal secrets doesn't actually mean we're going to get caught. In fact, it means that our training and our preparation reduces the probabilities that we're going to get caught. So the real risk is actually quite low. So when I started my own journey of becoming more public, I had a background in perceived and real risk. The real risks to me, if I say something that violates my secrecy agreement with CIA, I'm going to get a knock on the door from legal counsel, Office of General Counsel at CIA. I might get fined. I might go to jail. Who knows what might happen? They're going to shut down my business. That's real risk. I might have somebody who just gets pissed off about what I'm saying and they send me, cyanide in the mail. I don't know. That's all real. Like there's a potentiality for all of these crazy things, but the probability isn't very high, especially not if I take steps to protect myself, protect my household, make sure I say the right things. But if I let myself focus on perceived risk, oh, well, what if I say something people don't like? Or what if I say something that people laugh at? Or what if I look goofy in a video, whatever it might be, right? Who cares? Like the truth is that you have to be able to calculate real risk and then use real risk to weigh the risk-benefit scenario. If you're trying to weigh the risk-benefit scenario using perceived risk, you're always going to be underestimating your ability to grow and overestimating your risk factor. So it's all about understanding that risk is important to success. If you're willing to take on more risk, then you're willing to embrace more success. If you hesitate to add the risk, then you're also holding back your potential for great success.
The difficulty is that people confuse the two. You know, perceived risk can appear as real, maybe even more real than real risk. People would say, well, the real risk of receiving some cyanide in the post is very low. That's okay. But the risk of me being stupid on the internet, actually, maybe that is a big deal. And the our ability to lose rationality under cognitive stress and under emotional pain and fear is pretty big.
It is, but it's still just perceived. That's what's important. You got to go through the cognitive exercise. Like, just to use your example, saying something goofy on the internet. You say something goofy you don't even say something goofy on the internet. Do you remember when there was a musician, R. Kelly? There was a musician who actually was like caught abusing females.
Pretty sure he's in jail now.
Okay. So I don't even remember what happened to him. And I'll bet most of the people listening to this right now don't remember what happened to him, but we all remember that something happened to him, right? We forget that time, just like I think we talked about it earlier, there's big things and there's small things. We remember the big things. We don't really remember the small things. So if you go on the internet and say something silly, I've been on the internet and said stupid stuff 1,000 times, right? Those things fade away. The things that you do well are the things that tend to last. Arnold Schwarzenegger has this awesome, I feel like it's a TV interview. I wish I had a citation for it, but somebody out there said, you know, Arnold, do you remember the worst movie you ever acted in? And he looked at the camera and he was like, oh yeah, I remember the worst movie I was ever in, but nobody else does. Right? And I will forever remember that, because Arnold Schwarzenegger was in some terrible fucking movies, man. He was in some horrible movies. Nobody remembers those. We remember all the awesome Schwarzenegger movies, right? Even if you try to remember some of his bad movies, you might only come up with one or two, even though you may have watched 3 or 4. Go do a Google search and you'll be like, I remember watching that. That was a bad movie. That was a bad movie. That was a bad movie. The human condition, we prioritize information. We choose to remember certain things. We remember macro things with macro level emotions. So if you or I do something stupid on the internet, 5 days from now, most people aren't going to remember it. It's got a pretty amazing half-life, and then it's gone. So what's the real risk? The real is almost nothing.
I would agree. I would say that there is a threshold above which stupid things can become who you are, though.
True.
I would say that the internet's disposition to smear people with negative stories. There are some people for whom Joe Rogan will always be the N-word compilation guy now. And that's a man who's put out more content than pretty much anybody else alive right now.
Right.
The reason that story tried to take hold was, typically they say, look, this is the tip of the iceberg that we know is his bigoted, misogynistic, racist, cis heteronormative patriarchal past. The problem and the reason that story didn't take hold is because most of the people that story was aimed at said, I've seen the whole iceberg. Mm-hmm. I've watched 200, 500, 1,000 hours of this guy. You can't try and tell me that there is something lurking that I haven't seen, because the weight of evidence that I have on the other side of the scale is so great. That being said, I think that not doing something foolish and dumb and silly, that is something which is almost exclusively out of your control. Like, you're going to make these little errors regularly. Not doing something which is career ending is almost always within your control. Mm. I think that for the most part, unless you get unlucky and it's some strange combination of situations, this is obviously on average, right? But the lion's share of the bell curve of situations that could end you, you have to have not paid attention. You have to have gone to a situation without the requisite care and attention. And perhaps I'm creating a little Cassandra complex for myself here. But my point being, with sufficient care, I think that you can avoid most of the big problems. And the point being, once you breach that threshold, I do think that you will always be your greatest mistake to a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree with that. You will always be your biggest mistake to a lot of people. I love your bell curve visual right there, because so often we we forget that there's a big fat center to the bell curve, because all of the interesting stories, the things that most of us like to talk about, are not inside the bell curve. They're at the skinny end on either side. The people who are extremely successful or the people who are total failures. Nobody really likes to talk about the middle class guy making $85,000 a year with a happy marriage and 2 kids. That's just not an interesting person to talk about. So we end up talking about these fringe issues. Again, going back to real risk and perceived risk, there will always be people who hate you, always. Even people who don't know who you are right now, if they were to find out who you are, there's always going to be people who hate you. That's a real risk. So what? They're on the small end of the bell curve. Because let's be honest, the fat end of the bell curve, most people aren't going to remember you. You run a super successful podcast, man. There's 300 million adults. There's 300 million Americans, 155 million adults. The vast majority of them, they don't know you. They don't know me. They're not going to remember you. They're not going to remember me. Even Joe Rogan, as fantastically famous as he is, right? There's a huge population out there that just, they know of the name, but they've never watched an episode. They may never watch an episode. It's just the reality of it. That's the bell curve nobody likes to talk about. We like to talk about the fringes, the people who love you, the people who hate you. But there's a whole group in the middle that you kind of don't matter to them because they're watching the History Channel or they're, doing whatever, trying to just make it through the day.
We would care far less about what other people think about us if we realized how rarely they do.